My name is Desmond Miles. I'm a prisoner of war. A war I never knew existed, waged by two groups I never thought were real. Templars and Assassins. The Animus showed me the truth. The things I've seen, the things I've been. 1,000 years of history flowing through my veins, brought to life by this machine. They're using me to search for something. Call it the Apple. It's an artifact, one of many so-called pieces of Eden. Templars collect them. It's how they stay in power. And if the Templars get their hands on another one, everything will change. They want to make us all their slaves. When they first brought me here, I was afraid of what would happen if I tried to fight back. Now? Now I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. But I can't do it alone. And maybe I don't have to. I met someone. Her name is Lucy. I think she's on my side. She's gone now. She's taken away by that bastard Warren Vidic and his Templar masters. I don't know what will happen to her, or what'll happen to me. All I know is I need to get out of here. And I need to do it soon. My name is Desmond Miles, and this is my story.
Welcome to Retrotopia, the podcast where every episode is a ticket back to the things we loved, the things we forgot, and the things that somehow seemed better before we had to pay bills. I'm your host, Brian, and this is episode 138, and Assassins. Pull up your hoods, check your hidden blades, and try not to accidentally leap into a hay cart from 3 stories up, because today I'm tackling one of gaming's biggest, longest running, and occasionally the most confusing franchise. This week I'm ranking the mainline Assassin's Creed games. From the sun-baked streets of the Holy Land to the rooftops of Renaissance Italy, from pirate-infested Caribbean waters to Viking raids, revolutions, pyramids, or whatever historical landmark Ubisoft could fit into a synchronization point, we're climbing every tower, uncovering every conspiracy, and judging every leap of faith along the way. Which game deserves a place amongst the Brotherhood's elite? Which one gets left behind in the Animus with a corrupted save file? And how many times can a series reinvent itself before somebody says, well, wait, weren't we supposed to be assassins? Expect questionable historical expertise, entirely too many hours spent collecting feathers, and enough hooded protagonists to fill a medieval family reunion. So grab your eagle vision, avoid the Templars, and remember, nothing is true and everything is rankable. This is Retrotopia. Now, if you're just here for the episode, you can head about 30 minutes down the road and you should be able to find the beginning of my ranking system. But we like this intro and we like to do it, and we hope you stick around. But before we get into the fun, I do have to do some plugs. So if you could rate us 5 stars and leave a comment wherever you get your podcast, it helps us grow and we appreciate it very much. And if you want to find us on social media, you can do so at linktree/Retrotopia. That's linktr.ee/Retrotopia. There you can find a link to all, like I said, our social media, as well as a link to our Discord, which you can join for free and partake in the small community, but very positive community that we're developing. As well, you can join our Patreon, which is free to do so. And when you join the Patreon for free, you get to take parts in poll, which we just had the episode 150 RPG poll just finished, and I'm announcing now Golden Sun won that. So we will be playing Golden Sun for episode 150. You'll also be able to chat with the host, write in about the game of the week, write into the host on the 9-bit banter box. You'll get the extra show's Quick Play, which is a short review series, and Retro Bites Neo's roughly about 15 days early with an extra topic, which is now in video format. And that's just a show where Joe and I talk about a different subject every month. Have a lot of fun with that one. Also, we have a hero tier, and for just $2 US a month, you can get everything I just mentioned. Plus, you can select a game for a host a review on Quick Play. You get our other series, New Game Plus, where we review something a little bit newer that doesn't really fit inside the retro scope. And you also get a shout out like our newest heroes, Dave McGinnis, The Joe Q Car Show, John Aguilera, and Rivis27. And you might hear a bit of a cut here because as I was recording the intro, we got another new Patreon, A Sneeze, Father of a Chew. Thank you all for joining. Your support means the world to us. And now that the plugs are out of the way, it's time we give you, the audience, a chance to write into the host on what we call the 9-bit banter box, which is culturally elegant. And first up, we have Unbuckled Comics, who says, Brian, what's the hardest game you have beaten? Was the payoff worth it? What game have you beaten that had the best difficulty to payoff ratio? Hollow Knight is the hardest game I've beaten. Celeste and Metroid Dread also come to mind. Out of the three, Celeste's ending felt more in line with its difficulty, where Hollow Knight, the ending I got was the knight becoming the Hollow Knight, felt too small for everything you go through. Dread was an incredible final boss, but I barely remember the end of that story. Well, I've been a gamer for a long time, so of course you have NES hard games. I beat Battletoads. I think this podcast has motivated me to beat some games I never did before, but I beat Battletoads, which is pretty brutal. That and Contra I beat as well. Contra being one of the hardest games I think ever out there. But I also did beat Celeste. Celeste does have a good payoff for the end of the game. I mean, it also has a good gameplay loop because dying isn't something that gets annoying because you just fail and then you immediately start all over again. You don't even have time to to feel bad about dying because your brain's already back at it thinking about how to get over that hump that killed you the last time. Other NES games I beat were like Punch-Out was pretty hard the first time as a kid, taking out Mike Tyson. When I knocked him out, that was a pretty big one. Super Star Wars for the Super Nintendo, I beat that when I was younger. That game is brutally hard, and I think I made it pretty clear I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but that was a great game. If you like Star Wars or you don't play that game, I'll beat Comic Zone for the show here, so that one is brutally hard. I can't think of the hardest game I've beaten, but literally, there's just so many games that when you get over that hump, it makes you feel good. It's more satisfying beating a game that's extremely hard than it is just like a story-based game that, you know, I sing their praises all the time. Like, beating Celeste has a better feeling than beating Chrono Trigger. I'm going to say that right now because beating Celeste is a challenge, and it challenges everything you do about video games. Where Chrono Trigger is a story, you're going to beat the game eventually. I'd have to say probably the most recent game, though. I've been playing The Long Dark, and I played the story mode. It's called Wintermute, but there is a survival mode, and there is no end to the survival mode. The literal goal of the game is literally to survive as long as you possibly can, and you're going to be going up against the environments of a frozen fictional island called Bear Island in the north of Canada, and you have to hunt for resources depending on the level that you pick to start out with and where on the map you pick, because that changes things too. Like, you can start close to a town, get more resources, or you can start, you know, out in the middle of nowhere and have to huff your way to God knows where because you don't have a map. It is brutally hard to survive long periods of time, so I would say that's my most recent game, but it is so satisfying when you do get through it, and there's an achievement for surviving for 500 in-game days, and I will never get that. Thanks for the question. Next up, we got Blue Yoshi 94. What is the music for Choose One, Lose One? Also, as an unrelated question, if you could add a new shell to Mario Kart, what would it look like, and what would it do? I like this question. Actually, I read this question and I kind of thought about it and started thinking of Super Mario World. Like, what are the colors of the shells? We already have the blue shell, the red shell, and the green shell, which leaves the yellow shell. The yellow shell is what it's going to be. It's going to be the yellow shell because why not? Actually, I'll do two. I just thought of another idea. So, the yellow shell will be one that stops the cart, jumps straight up, flips, and does a ground pound. Now, the advantage of this, if you do it right, you can stop a blue shell. That's how it would work. Also, you lose less time than if you got wiped out by the blue shell. That's the advantage of it, but the timing has to be very precise. Also, for a normal effect, it would just create a shockwave that would either knock other shells, like red and green shells, or basically anybody within its field of effect, their power-up would be destroyed. And if they're using their power-up, like they're in the bullet form or something, it would be destroyed. It would be superly overpowered, but the disadvantage would be you stop going forward, and if you don't have a cart that accelerates good, well, that's another disadvantage. The other one would be the multicolored shell, and you see this in Super Mario World where it goes through all the different colors, so The shell would be a randomized thing. It could give you the power of any of the shells, but it depends when you use it. So it'll constantly be cycling through colors fast enough that you can kind of time it, but not so fast that, not so fast that you can time it, but fast enough that it's not going to be easy to time while you're racing anyways. And it would just give you the effect of one random shell. So you could be in second place and you get this, and all of a sudden you get a blue shell. That would just be game-changing, I think. So that would be. But to answer your initial question, it is called Game Show from Earthworm Jim 2 soundtrack. That is the name of the song I use for Choose One, Lose One. I should have answered that first, but I really wanted you to hold on for the shell question and get the satisfying answer at the end. Made it hard, right? So that is my answer. Yellow shell, ground pound, lose speed, but can stop a blue shell, and then the multicolor cycling shell that will give you the randomly powers of one shell. And of course, it won't sit there and give you equal opportunity. Like the blue shell will be 1 in maybe 10 cycles or something like that. I have no idea. I can't flesh this out. Nintendo's not returning my calls. All right, next up we have Old Man Gamer says, if you had to run a shop in an RPG, what shop are you running? The inn, weapon shop, item shop, or the magic shop? None of those. I am running a black market weapons armor shop that only sells the most rare and expensive stuff. I'm underground. Like, I'm not even on the main town map. You have to find me in back of a dungeon on the hardest quest of the game, and I'm just standing there like nothing matters, even though you fight the super boss to get to me, and I have just the best stuff. And it costs way too much money. I could retire off of selling one sword, but now I'm dedicated. I'm dedicated in the back of that cave. That's where I'm going to be. That's where I'm going to be, yeah. All right, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Ask, who's going to win the FIFA World Cup? I am Canadian, my friend. I am all about that hockey. I don't really follow footy or football or soccer, depending on where you are. But it is happening here in Canada. It's happening in Toronto and Vancouver, starting in a couple of days from the time I record this. I'm not going to watch, I'll be honest. I don't find football or soccer that interesting. So I will just completely gloss over it. Maybe I'll check to see how Canada's doing. So that's going to be my pick. Canada is going to pull a miracle run this year, and they're going to take out every FIFA team, and Canada's going to hoist that cup. But if I had to guess, picking a team, probably, I don't know, like, I guess I always see like Brazil or Spain or France, or these teams always seem to be winning it. So I'll pick one of those teams. You know what? I got a buddy from Brazil. I'm going to go Brazil all in. Are they even in? They're probably in the tournament. But yeah, there you go. If Canada doesn't win, it goes to Brazil. And that's only because I got a good friend from Brazil, so I'm going to support my homie. Next up, we have The Big Deal, who says, what is Alan doing on vacation? Wrong answers only. Oh, outstanding question. Here's the thing you guys don't know. Alan is British. And what are all British people? That's correct. They are all members of MI6. Alan is a 00 agent. He's 0069. There you go. That'll work. 0069's over wherever he is right now. I'm not going to reveal his location. That's classified top secret. But he's on a mission to save the world from somebody who's trying to get rid of all retro video games. It's only him who can stop this, and there's a lot of explosions happening, because that's basically a Bond movie, is things explode and everybody's just like, oh, let's carry on with their day, man, even though it's fantastic. So that's what he's doing. Wrong answers. Alan isn't on vacation. He is a Bond, and he is on his way to save us from the evil retro video game destroyer. I can't think of a name. Who would be somebody who... Oh, Dr. Gamergate or something. There we go. Hopefully that satisfies you. It satisfies me. Next up, we got Munch, who says, Brian, a.k.a. Mr. Canada. I just caught up on Neobites, where when you were discussing the Zelda movie, you mentioned how you weren't sure how they would do a potentially mute Link. I think I figured out the solution. Cartoon Link. Obviously, this would go over super well. Yeah, you are a monster. You, sir, are just an absolute monster. If you don't know what he's talking about, the 1980s cartoon Legend of Zelda, Link is a sexual predator constantly trying to get his business on with Zelda, who's basically leads him on. So it's kind of a toxic dynamic there if you really watch the show, but Link is by far the worst of the two. That would make for an absolutely cancelable movie for sure. The Retro Bites he's talking about, we invited Randy from the Read Watch Play podcast on with us, and we talked about video game adaptations and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to the Zelda movie, but yeah, it's just when you take a silent protagonist, and the concept of a silent protagonist is to further engage the player into the game itself, where you are only speaking with the answers you choose in options, like menu or discussion options, like yes or no or whatever it is. And I don't want them to overdo Link, and they can do that thing where they make him into the cartoon Link again. So I don't know. It's going yet to be seen. They're filming it now, so we'll see how it's received, because you never know. Next up, we have Fill Up My Mouth with Farts, who has a comment that has already stumbled me once, so I had to try to re-record this. So they say, "Hi Brian, as someone who I believe grew up in the 80s and 90s, what is something that we did on the regular that a kid or teen just wouldn't be able to comprehend? Was it being booted out the door in the morning with the expectation you wouldn't be seen again until dinner? Or having to actually go to a friend's house to see if they were home? Or mostly the fact that none of the stupid stuff that we did as kids is documented in pics, videos, or social media?" Stumbled through it again, but I managed to make it. I'm not reading that a 16th time. 15's my limit. All right. You know what I miss about the 80s and 90s? I miss waking up, running downstairs. No, it's not even that. I miss me and my brother. Oh God, before VCRs were invented, and I'm really aging myself right now. Well, they were invented. We just didn't own one at the time. Me and my brother became the best, negotiators with each other in order to watch all the shows we wanted to watch, while sacrificing the shows we wanted to watch, but the other person negotiated that show into the rotation. Then we got a VCR and all bets were off. Now we had to determine, what are we going to watch live and what are we going to record for Saturday morning cartoons. It was a balancing act that, I think was probably a great life lesson on how to, moderate your life so that what's important and what's not. But that was one thing I used to love about the 80s and I guess the early 90s. Also, you're right, getting kicked out of the house. There's a park down the road when I was a young kid, or when I was a teenager. We lived in a small hamlet, so I was able to leave the house, run into the woods, and play all day. Or I could just sit in my room and record cassettes from one boombox to the other, or the radio onto a cassette, or do all that stuff we just didn't have today. The lack of social media was really good, because you're right, we had to go and talk to people. I remember making the phone call and hoping the hell your friend's parents didn't pick up, or when the phone rang, you actually talked on the phone. I don't think I've used my cell phone as a phone in probably about a good year, outside of having to call get my car fixed or something like that. I have not called a friend on my phone. It's either text messages or gifts. That's how we communicate nowadays. What else? What other stupid stuff did we get into? I got into so much trouble as a kid. I remember so many little things that probably is better talked about around a fire pit with a couple of beers, because it'll loosen me up a little bit. But, yeah, I think kids today are lacking that kind of thing. Before I had my kid, I read so many stories of people having their kids play in the backyard. I remember this one story, and I don't remember what town. It was up here in Canada. This woman was, working from home, and she had her office set up to overlook her backyard. And her 11-year-old and her 9-year-old and her 5-year-old were playing in the backyard, and somebody called child services on them and said the kids were abandoned in the backyard. We can't do this stuff anymore, because, the boomer class, let's call them, had their fun, and now they don't want anybody else to have fun. And I know I'm screaming like an old man here, but it just feels like kids today can't go out of the house without, people watching them like a hawk. It sucks. I have buses that come out in the front of my house. You might hear them in this recording because, they don't come in quietly. But there's kids that are the same age as my kids, and the parents are still walking them to the bus stop in the morning. And it's like, you gotta unleash the kid and let him be stupid. I encourage my kid to go out and be dumb. Like, you gotta have that life experience of doing something stupid. Like, obviously don't send your kid to get hurt, but, let them have a little bit of freedom to make their own decisions. And I could probably go on about this for hours, but I think I need to stop because it might turn into a whole different podcast. But yeah, if you weren't an 80s or 90s kid, well, life sucks for you because you're always behind the camera, or in front of the camera, I should say. As for the rest of us, we grew up in the golden age, and I think we're better than everyone else. Next up, I have Hooli, who says, Brian, do you have a favorite paradox? I think the crocodile paradox is a fun mind bender. Crocodile paradox, I like that one. The crocodile paradox is basically a crocodile promises to return a kidnapped child if the parent correctly predicts whether the child will be returned. It creates a logical contradiction when the parents predict the child will not be returned. Like, if the parent says, you will not return my child, well, the crocodile can't keep the child because that proves the parent's right, and therefore he has to return the child. But if he returns the child, he proves the parent's wrong, and he gets to keep the kid. It's a loop. So no matter which way that one goes, nobody wins. I do have a couple other ones I do like. There's the liar's paradox, where, the one that says this statement's false. I think that was one of the first ones I learned. So that creates a contradiction, because if it's true, then it must be false. And of course, if it's false, then it must be true. So, well, I guess one of the biggest examples of this would be a sign that reads, everything on this sign is false, which leaves no way to determine whether, it's actually true or false. Probably one of my favorite, most recent ones I learned of, and I think I learned about this one in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the ship of Theseus. If every part of the ship is gradually replaced over time, it raises that question whether it remains the same ship or becomes a different one. So there's two parts of this. So if all the wooden planks on the famous ship are replaced one by one over decades, is it still the original ship, or is it a whole new ship? And if you take all those planks and rebuild another ship, is that new, like that rebuilt ship, is that the ship of Theseus, since it has all the original planks from the original ship of Theseus? So that one is probably like one of the most recent ones I've learned that I really, really enjoy. Of course, I have to talk about a couple of time travel paradoxes because, I loves me some time travel. So way back before even Retrotopia existed, I tried to slice together a podcast idea about talking about the time paradoxes of Chrono Trigger, and I know I talk about Chrono Trigger too much. I'm looking at you, you know who you are, but I really like the game and there's a lot about it. It's my Star Wars. So a couple of the paradoxes I liked. One is the bootstrap paradox. So if you take an object or a piece of information or event and send it back in time, it becomes a very thing that caused itself to exist, so there's no clear point of origin. As an example, like a musician travels back in time and gives a young composer the sheet music for a famous song, which then the composer later publishes who actually wrote the song. This is like Back to the Future. When Marty plays Johnny Be Good, and then Marvin Berry, Chuck's cousin, picks up the phone and shows him the song, and then Chuck Berry becomes famous for it, who actually wrote the song? That's the bootstrap paradox. The other one is the grandfather paradox, and I love this one because of Futurama. Futurama did it so well. When they went back to the episode's called All's Well That Roswell, and the team ends up, making microwave popcorn, which combines, red and blue, and sends them back in the time to Roswell, where they're the alien ship that landed, and Bender, of course, becomes the spaceship, and Bender becomes Zoidberg is the alien, so yeah, they're taking apart Zoidberg. But Fry ends up killing his grandfather, and then ends up, becoming his own grandfather. So that's what the grandfather paradox is. A time traveler goes back in time and prevents their grandfather from having children, creating a contradiction because the traveler would never have existed, ergo could never make the trip to stop their grandfather. So I already gave the example of that with the Futurama. It's done early on in Chrono Trigger with Marl. She disappears because the queen is not saved because Marl went back and she looks like the queen, blah, 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 blah. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. So yeah, those are my favorite paradoxes right there. And, you got any more? Come to the Discord, talk about paradoxes. I love talking about paradoxes. They are a good time. And that's going to do it for the 9-Bit Banter Box. Thank you, everybody, for writing in. As always, love doing that. And we're going to just slide right into the next one with a little bit of that game show music from Earthworm Jim 2. It is Choose One, Lose One.
Ladies and gentlemen, roll up and choose your power-up from the game of the week. You pick a power, we pick a consequence. It's Choose One, Lose One, the game where everyone's a loser.
Alright, first up we have the incredible Hooli, who says, "Give me the Animus. I want to experience history in action." Well, you get the Animus. Unfortunately, history is not as easy as you thought because you don't speak any of the languages. Hell, even English wasn't spoken the same way about 500 years ago, so you end up understanding nothing and nobody understands you. You basically just stand there and watch a foreign film without subtitles. Next, Dylan Johnson says, "I want a conversation with Socrates. He was in Assassin's Creed Odyssey." You get your conversation with Socrates, but you find out because of your advanced, knowledge of the future, he is just not as interesting as he is in the books. Next up, we have Yoshi94, Blue Yoshi94, if I read the whole name. He says, "I want a black flag." Well, too bad. You get a red flag that you want to paint black. If you know the song, you know it. If you don't, my God, even I know the song. Old Man Gamer says, "I want the ability to just change what I am every day, Viking one day, pirate the next, and maybe then a samurai." Haha. You can do that. It's called Spirit Halloween. Just go in there, buy yourself some costumes, and you can be whatever you want. Nobody's stopping you. I was about to say it's the 90s, but it's the 2020s, so you can do what you want. No judgment. Fill Up My Mouth with Fart says, "Just the ability to go into a group of walking citizens and disappear from anyone who wants to find me. Plus, the citizens don't notice me either." There you go. That's the caveat to it, right? Walking into a random group of people just does not fly nowadays. But you can do that. You can walk into a random group of people and disappear, and it's a great party trick, except for nobody's looking for you. So you could just stand in the open and get the same effect. Radmax says, "I choose to lose the repetitive climb a tower and unlock a map mechanic that is injected into every open world game for the last 20 years. So a little sidebar on this one. Far Cry 5 actually made that joke when they made you climb a tower at the beginning of the game as a way to say we're not making you climb towers anymore. It was pretty good. But you do lose the repetitive climb a tower and unlock the map. Now you just don't know where you're going because you don't have a map. So your car dash GPS displays nothing. Just a little car that's driving into the nothingness. Next up, we have Adamantic, who says, "I want to be able to pull off a sick white robe and braces." Well, my mind went to a dark place, so I'm going to avoid that. I'm just going to brush that out of the way. You can pull off a white robe, except for you can only do it after Labor Day, where wearing white is just considered taboo for some reason. There you go. Any other time of the year, you just can't pull it off. Maybe if you got a belt. Next up, we have Munchie, who says, "Okay, I want the ability to just be in shape and able to parkour over everything." Granted, you got a gym membership. It's up to you now to do the work and get that ability, but I'm with you, brother. I am with you because I am not sitting on a tower looking down at you on this one. I am kind of probably looking up a little bit. And finally, we have Venom1438 says, "I want the ability to jump from extremely high dangerous places into small piles of hay that would almost certainly kill any normal being, but apparently not phase assassins at all." You can do this, but this is your only mode of transport. You now must climb every tower, and you must jump into a pile of hay to get to the next block. You can't go around the buildings, you gotta go over. And you can only do it where there's bird poop on the roof because, well, that was the indicator of where to jump, so you're constantly walking in bird poop. All right, that is everything for Choose One, Lose One. I like this one. This one was fun because it really opened up as opposed to limited to a game. Maybe we'll start looking at how we can make this a little bit more broad. Maybe, I don't know. There's ideas in the oven. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's it for Choose One, Lose One. And guess what? Alan's on vacation this week, as you all know. That's why I'm doing a ranking list. So I don't think there's going to be a GI. Or is there? No, there's no GI. Alan's on vacation. We're gonna let him just, be drunk on a beach somewhere. So we're just gonna skip that whole rigmarole this week because I'm not good enough to do it, and Sam's a busy man, so I never want to inconvenience him when I don't have to, which is why we're giving him a week off as well, just to refresh the old vocals. But it is time. It is time for us to get into the ranking list, and unlike traditional episodes, there's not going to be a huge transition here. We're just going to get into it because there is 11 games in the mainline Assassin's Creed franchise. So as mentioned, this week I'm doing something every Assassin's Creed fan eventually does and then immediately regrets. I am going to be ranking the mainline Assassin's Creed games, and that's right, 11 games, hundreds of hours, countless of hidden blades, more hay bales, and civilization should reasonably possess. And enough climbing to make OSHA file several complaints. Now, before anyone starts sharpening their hidden blades and typing angry comments here, I want to get a few things out of the way. First, this is a ranking that only covers the mainline Assassin's Creed games. That means games like Brotherhood, Revelation, Freedom Cry, and Dawn of Ragnarok, the hidden ones, Curse of the Pharaohs, Jack the Ripper, and all those other expansions and spin-offs aren't getting separate spots on the list, and they'll be considered as part of the game itself. This also doesn't cover those side-scrolling adventure, whatever, Assassin's Creed games, like the one I think was set in Russia. So secondly, ranking the Assassin's Creed is kind of like ranking pizza. At the end of the day, it's still pizza. Even the slice at the bottom of the list is probably better than a lot of games out there. And of course, some slices have extra cheese and some slices have all the pepperoni. And as you can tell, I have not eaten yet today and I'm getting kind of hungry. So finally, and this is important, this is not the definitive Assassin's Creed ranking. It is completely subjective. I stand by every placement on the list, at least today. Tomorrow I might wake up and replay Black Flag and spend 3 hours singing sea shanties, and all of a sudden half the ranking changes. Because this is being released before the Black Flag resync comes out. And Brian going to be all up in that. I am looking forward to that. That is the next big game this year I am looking forward to. So, at this point, like I said, not definitive Assassin's Creed ranking, and that is until I change my mind later. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's climb a tower, leap into the conveniently placed hay cart, and rank every mainline Assassin's Creed game from worst to best. And if your hidden blades are ready, let's begin. And we're going to start with some comments because, I couldn't fit these into specifics, so they get read right off the top. So Super Dave says, Assassin's Creed is definitely a franchise of all time. My first game was Assassin's Creed 2 and I loved it, but I dropped out of the franchise after number 3 and ignored everything until I played Black Flag this year. Very good game. I also grabbed Unity and Syndicate for dirt cheap, so maybe this will be my year to appreciate the Ass Creed games of yesteryear. Well, Super Dave, we're going to find out how I feel about those two games, Unity and the Syndicate, as we go through the list, because we also have Munchie, who's going to start us off. Says, well, I liked Assassin's Creed when it came out, but fell off at the third one. I always wanted to play Black Flag, but never got to it, which brings me to number 11 on my list, Assassin's Creed 3. So, this is probably the most divisive game in the franchise for me because it follows the brilliant Ezio trilogy, which is arguably the peak of Assassin's Creed storytelling, no spoilers. You follow Connor Kenway, who has one of the strongest motivations in the entire series. He has a desire to protect his people, his homeland, and his culture feels genuine and very grounded. Unfortunately, Connor himself is a difficult protagonist to connect with. So compared to the charismatic Ezio, Edward's charm, or Bayek's emotional depth, Connor comes off as this stoic, serious, and often emotionally flat character. To be fair, his personality makes sense given everything he's experienced throughout the story, and what Connor lacks in charisma, he really does make up for in conviction. His struggle to find freedom for the indigenous people caught between the British and colonials adds like a perspective very rarely seen in historical games. And you have Haytham Kenway, who is his father, might actually be one of the most interesting characters in the entire game. If you've played the game, if you haven't, you know what? I'm going to say this right out here. I'm probably going to end up spoiling something, but I'll try not to spoil endings of anything. So if you've played Assassin's Creed 3, you know the opening twist involves Haytham, and it remains one of the best introductions Ubisoft has ever created. Haytham starts out the game with a hidden blade, and you really, really think that he is an assassin. Now, you got to remember, Edward Kenway has not been introduced to the series yet because this game takes place before Black Flag, but Edward Kenway from Black Flag is Haytham's father, who is Connor's father. So there's like that hierarchy there. And Haytham turns out, like, he starts out with a hidden blade and you're assassinating somebody, so you're like, haha, it's an assassin. But it turns out the twist is he's actually a Templar. And it was one of the best opening sequence, and it really shocked me and got me right into the game. He's one of the few Templars who makes you stop and think about whether the assassins were actually right. Also, this game introduced a lot of important systems that would influence the future of the series, which include things like tree running, hunting. You had dynamic weather. It introduced the naval gameplay, I think was near the end, if I remember correctly. And of course, frontier exploration. And it went to the greatest country on the planet called Canada, which I think a couple of other games did as well. But any game that goes to Canada is A-OK by me, no bias. But looking back, Assassin's Creed 3 walked so Black Flag could run. This is what I'm talking about when I say it's hard to rank these games, because out of every negative I have for a game, I also have a lot of positive to say. Colonial America is historically really interesting location, but like compared to the Renaissance Italy or the Caribbean, it wasn't as visually exciting. And the American Revolution really does serve as a strong backdrop, but the cities really lack the verticality that made the earlier games fun to traverse. The biggest strength of the game is, I guess, its moral ambiguity. So unlike earlier titles, neither side feels completely right or wrong, and this game also really serves as a conclusion to the Desmond Miles story, making it one of the, I guess, most important series or entries in the overall franchise narrative. The story is good, but after spending 3 games with Ezio, it was almost impossible for Connor to live up to any expectations. So overall, it feels like a transitional game, really important to the series, but not one I revisited as often as others. In fact, I think I've only ever played this one once, and I played it through and through. I always do. Which brings us to number 10. And this is the most recent entry in the entire Assassin's Creed franchise. It's Assassin's Creed Shadows. And this is the one that takes place in feudal Japan and was one of the most requested settings in the franchise history. For years, fans wanted ninja samurais, castles, and political intrigue. So when Ubisoft finally delivered, the results were actually quite mixed. The game starts really strong. You get introduced to both Naoi and Yasuke before settling into the main story, which gives players a good understanding of the dual protagonist structure they're going for. Naoi feels like the Assassin's Creed character many longtime fans have really been waiting for. She's fast, stealthy, agile, and she's built around infiltration. When playing as Naoi, the game often feels like a modern version of the classic Assassin's fantasy. Yasuke, however, is essentially a walking tank. His combat is powerful, it's really satisfying, but it really feels disconnected from what Assassin's Creed traditionally is. Instead of sneaking through a castle, Yasuke is the guy kicking down the front gate. The biggest frustration I have with the game is when stealth-heavy missions suddenly force combat, and that happens with Naoi before you get Yasuke. And it was one of the things I had to push through because she was not built for head-to-head combat. So it just felt so disconnected from what they're trying to do. So you sneak through a fortress only to end up fighting everyone, which feels like it defeats the purpose of playing as a ninja. And the dual protagonist concept worked better in Syndicate because both Jacob and Evie still felt like assassins. So here it sometimes feels like Ubisoft combined 2 completely different games, almost like they're trying to capture the magic that is the Ghost series, because you play both the samurai and the ninja manner in those games. But the world itself is beautiful. The dynamic seasons, they're one of the most impressive environmental systems this franchise has ever attempted. And the castles, the villages, and the forests, and all the cities are really stunning. However, this also feels like another example of Ubisoft making Assassin's Creed bigger and more complicated than it really has to. And it feels like the company is trying to satisfy both the classic Assassins fans and the RPG fans at the same time. So that is number 10. That is Assassin's Creed. And next up, we got a comment from Old Man Gamer who says, the first one I played was Valhalla. I got a PS5 at launch at Target for Christmas, had to buy 2 games, get one free, and there was like 4 to 5 games out by then, so I picked that one. I thought it was amazing, but I also love Viking lore, just pillaging villages and having sex with everyone I could. Great times. And then you played the game. No, that's it. Number 9 is going to be Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And Vikings are cool, and sometimes that's enough to sell a game. Valhalla absolutely nails the fantasy of being a Viking warrior. You raid monasteries, you build settlements, you lead your clan, and you forge an alliance that all feels very fantastic. And Ivor is a strong protagonist who balances the Viking brutality with like genuine leadership. And that's actually a big thing, is because this game I played in a hotel that I was stuck in for 14 days. And that's how I got through this game, because the problem is that the game simply refuses to end. Great story, but really dragged out. And the open world, it's like one of the largest open worlds Ubisoft has ever created. And at times it feels like the game values this quantity over quality. The entire region can take hours to complete, and it doesn't always feel essential to the overall narrative. Compared to Odyssey, which came before it, which also has a huge map, Valhalla feels really stretched out. Like, England looks beautiful, but there are fewer opportunities for classic Assassin's Creed parkour. The cities are definitely smaller, they're way more spread out. The vertical playground that defines these earlier games, like the earlier games of Assassin's Creed, is largely absent from this game. The mythology content involving Odin and Loki is fascinating and actually very important to the current lore. And of course, it does have the DLC expansions, which continued this trend, like the Wrath of the Druids explores Ireland, the Siege of Paris revisits one of the most famous Viking campaigns, and of course, the Dawn of Ragnarok goes fully into the Norse mythology. The modern-day story contains one of the biggest revelations in the series, and if you're invested in the Isu lore, the Isu being the first people or the first civilization, Valhalla is essential to that story. So it's a great Viking game. Whether it's a great Assassin's Creed game depends what you value most about the franchise, but it sits at number 9 for me, because sitting at number 8 is a game a little more recent than that. It is Assassin's Creed Unity, and Super Dave, there's your answer. Assassin's Creed Unity sitting at number 8 is lower than Syndicate, so play Syndicate first. Or play this first to get it out of the way, then Syndicate. It's not a bad game. Just Unity may have had the worst launch in the franchise history. The glitches have become like internet famous. You got the missing faces, the broken animations, the crashes, and technical issues that overshadowed everything else, which is unfortunate because underneath all of that was actually a genuinely good Assassin's Creed game. Paris still remains one of the best cities Ubisoft has ever created. Every street feels alive. The massive crowds help really sell the chaos of the French Revolution, and the parkour system is arguably the best in the entire franchise. Moving across the rooftops in this game feels very smooth, fluid, very cinematic, and Arno himself is fine, but he never reaches like that iconic status of Ezio, Edward, or Bayek. And the story is more personal for him than it is epic. The relationship with Elise in the game is one of the emotional cores of this game, and the assassination mission allows players this unprecedented freedom in how they approach the targets. It also has co-op missions, which were an interesting experiment that deserved another chance. And of course, the Notre Dame recreation became so famous because years later, when the cathedral suffered a devastating fire, Ubisoft's recreation was so detailed that it became a valuable reference point for them to rebuild the cathedral. So looking back at this whole thing, Unity really feels like a game that was judged more for its launch and its actual quantity. And had it released in a polished state, it might actually be remembered differently. But that is my number 8. Number 7 is Assassin's Creed Origins. Origins had an almost impossible job. It had to reinvent Assassin's Creed after years of like the franchise becoming fatigued. I think it pulled it off. I really do. Bayek is one of the best protagonists Ubisoft has ever created. He has grief, anger, compassion, and this determination that makes him like really incredibly relatable. This is obviously set in early Egypt, and this game is about the origin of the entire Assassin's Creed. The story is successful because they made Bayek actually feel human. And ancient Egypt is probably one of the most visually stunning settings in gaming. And there was a exploration mode that you could use to learn about Egypt, because again, they took the time to be as historically accurate as possible. So you got things like standing in front of the pyramids or exploring Alexandria. It really feels incredible. The downside is that a lot of the map is literally just desert. Like, you have huge sections of the world that exist primarily because Egypt is huge. Origin introduced also the RPG mechanics, leveling, gear progression, and loot that you find in modern-day Assassin's Creed. And this fundamentally changed Assassin's Creed forever. Like, some of the fans love the evolution. Others felt it moved too far away from the franchise roots, and this is also where focused combat became like much more common than the actual stealth killing. The stealth first philosophy of earlier games, it started to fade here. You also have the Hidden Ones DLC, which is particularly important because it shows the early formation of the Brotherhood, which were called the Hidden Ones before it was called the Brotherhood. And Curses of the Pharaoh dives deep into the Egyptian mythology, and some of the most imaginative environments were created in the franchise. As an origin story for Assassin's Creed, Origin succeeds brilliantly. As the beginning of the RPG era, your mileage may vary. So that is number 7. Next up, we got Hooli, who will introduce our number 6. He says, Assassin's Creed, the first one, was one of my first games for the 360, and I really fell in love with it. The world seemed so big and beautiful, and at the time, and being able to climb any building felt amazing. I really need to play the rest of the games. Yes, you do. Which brings us into number 6, and that is the original Assassin's Creed. This is where it all started. Prince of Persia's Assassins. That's what, if you listen to the Prince of Persia episode, you'll understand that reference. But this is, like I said, where it all started. And looking back today, the game feels very repetitive. The structure is simple. You gather information, you find a target, you assassinate the target, and then you repeat the whole process throughout the entire game. But in 2007, this was revolutionary. The social stealth was unlike anything else on the market at the time. The ability to blend into crowds, climb massive buildings, and perform cinematic assassinations was really a fresh thing in the video game sphere. And Altair remains one of the most important characters in the franchise. Obviously, he is the OG, he's the original. His growth from an arrogance to wisdom is one of the strongest character arcs in the series. And the philosophical conversations with targets helped really establish Assassin's Creed as more than just kind of this action game. It asks questions about freedom, truth, and power, and without this game, obviously none other exists in the franchise. Revelations later gave Altair one of the most satisfying send-off in gaming, Revelations being part of the second Assassin's Creed 2, the Ezio story. And of course, the original may be rough around the edges today, but we cannot overstate its importance. Oh man, I forgot how hard it was to do these lists. My throat is like completely dry and my nose is clogging up. But I'm going to power through because we have Dylan Jacobson who's going to bring up our next one, who says, being excited for this Since the Mirage episode. Odyssey is my favorite of the mainline games. Looking forward to seeing how they are ranked by you. Well, Odyssey sits number 5, which is very telling of how difficult this list is because Odyssey is fantastic. And this is the game that proves Ubisoft can make an enormous open world and still keep it fun, which was something that they struggled with in Origins. Ancient Greece is just absolutely gorgeous. They really built it well. Every island feels like a vacation destination in this game, and Cassandra is one of the strongest protagonists of the franchise. You can also play as her brother, I can't remember his name, but Cassandra is the canon character. Her performance is very charismatic, funny, and memorable. The only thing that changes between those two is they swap lines. They actually recorded 2 sets of the same script, one for Cassandra, one for her brother, who again's name escapes me right now, and I didn't write it down, and maybe it's in my notes here as I read on. So I'll do that. So the RPG system here is where it reached its peak in this game. The dialogue choices, the branching stories, you have romantic options, and multiple endings all created this unique experience in the game. The mercenary system is one of the best side mechanics of the entire franchise. Being hunted across Greece creates this constant tension as you're running because you'll all of a sudden be chased down by somebody who's trying to kill you. Eventually you learn how to exploit it though, but it's still fun. So I learned that if you're on a horse and you have the hardest of people who are hunting you down, mercenaries, all you do is do big circles and swing your sword when you get close enough, and you'll eventually just hack them down. And yeah, you know what? I beat the hardest guys that way, so it it's doable. Let's just put it that way. There is ship combat. It's not quite Black Flag quality, but it is the closest the series has come since. And you have the Atlantis DLC, which expands on the Izu mythology very dramatically. Legacy of the First Blade, another DLC, directly connects Odyssey to the Assassin's lineage, which is important because it is Assassin's Creed game and it is canon. And of course, the world is huge, but unlike Valhalla, it doesn't really feel empty, and that might be because of the amount of sailing you get to do in this game. Every region has something interesting to discover, and this is one of the few Assassin's Creed games that can legitimately compete with Black Flag for like best in the series, even though I put it number 5 on my list. Also, yes, climbing the giant statue for immature reasons, like hanging off the dong, became kind of a universal player experience. It's like a rite of passage when you start playing this game, and it's right there. You're not going to miss it. You are going to walk past this statue, and you are going to hang off the dong. Guaranteed. So that was number 5, and that tells you how much I'm going to respect the rest of this list. Coming in at number 4 is a game I just actually finished finally, and turned out to be probably like one of my favorite Assassin's Creed feelings of all time. That's Assassin's Creed Mirage. Mirage feels like Ubisoft was finally listening to longtime fans. It's after years of those RPG mechanics and these giant worlds, Mirage really returns to the fundamentals. Like stealth matters again, assassinations matter again, the parkour matters again, and Baghdad is one of the most densely designed cities since Unity. Every rooftop feels useful in this game. Like every alley feels like it could hide a secret. Like the exploration in this game is redonkulous, and I'm going to use that word because I like it. The smaller scale really works in this game's favor, and Basim had already become like one of the most important characters through Valhalla, and this game gives us the origin of that character. Like, if you know what's going on, you know what's going on, but Basim is important to the main story now and is one of the most important characters of the franchise. So the assassinations in this game are kind of funny because you're usually given a target and you don't need to kill your way to the target. You can sneak by everybody and just kill the target. One of my favorite moments was I had to sneak into this fort or this encampment, and I had to kill this bad guy, and I snuck in a crack in the wall, and I popped up and I was underneath a bridge and there's this guy standing on top of it. So I climbed the bridge and I stabbed him, and all of a sudden it gave me that, like, cuts to a new screen where you've killed your target. And I was just like, whoa, well, that was quick. And I walked out without ever talking to anybody else. They didn't even know he was dead. Probably still don't. But it was, I laughed. It was funny because it felt like it should feel, like an Assassin's game should feel. Like, you know, that Splinter Cell thing where you can sit and like crawl through the entire level, take your target out, and it's just, that's what these games really should be about. So that gives you that like classic Assassin's Creed feel. It really does reward the observation rather than forcing you into combat like Shadows did. And this game proves that Assassin's Creed doesn't need to be 100 hours long to be enjoyable. It was a nice, tight, compact little game, and it really does feel like a love letter to the original game. So this is modern controls meets classic formula, and it worked out so well. So that is number 4. Number 3 is going to be brought in by Fill Up My Mouth with Farts. It says, one of the ones I have played, my order is 2, Odyssey, 3, and Syndicate. Well, here comes number 3, which is Assassin's Creed Syndicate. This one is the Fry twins, and they are one of the best protagonist pairings Ubisoft has ever created. The Jacob and Evie, they complement each other perfectly. One is supposed to represent action, that would be Jacob, and one is supposed to represent the stealth, which is Evie, and you can switch between them. And unlike Shadows, they both feel like assassins. So you're in Victoria, London, and this is an incredible setting. The Industrial Revolution really creates this unique atmosphere, unlike any other game in the series. The driving horse-drawn carriages across London mechanic, or the whole idea of it, never really gets old. And I think it's the only game you get to drive something that's not a ship. Also, there's the taking over the district thing they had in this game where you have to basically you form a gang and you're liberating these districts, and it's really addictive. Like every borough feels like a mini campaign unto itself, and the side activities really give you this sense of reclaiming the city. You also have the Jack the Ripper DLC, which is probably one of the best expansions in the franchise, where it explores an older Evie and presents one of the darkest stories that Ubisoft really has ever told. Syndicate often gets overlooked, I think, because it released after Unity's troubled launch, which is a shame because it's one of the most consistently fun games in the series. Like after Black Flag and Unity, I felt like the franchise, it peaked and was on its way down. But this one genuinely actually brought me back into enjoyment of the series. And I think this is the one before Origins. So this is the last, I guess, of the main or original style Assassin's Creed before they went to the RPG mechanics. So it is really good. I definitely recommend anybody who has a chance to play this game if they're an Assassin's Creed fan. But that is number 3. Coming in with number 2 is the big deal with his comment. It says, I remember playing all the mainline games up through Black Flag, but I couldn't remember anything about them past the Ezio trilogy. That's a lame answer, but I'll go with 2. If for no other reason than the ending. If you know, you know. Assassin's Creed 2 is my number 2, and that includes Brotherhood and Revelations. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I am going to put them all together and make it one gigantic ass story, which is why this game hits so high on the list, because it isn't just the best trilogy in Assassin's Creed, it's one of the best trilogies in gaming, in my opinion. We spend decades of Ezio's life with him. We watch him grow, like, it starts off with him as this reckless young nobleman chasing girls in Florence, and then it turns him, of course, into a legendary assassin mentor. No other protagonist receives this much development in the franchise. Renaissance Italy, of course, is a perfect setting for the Assassin's Creed games, and you get to meet Leonardo da Vinci, who remains one of the greatest supporting characters in the franchise. Brotherhood takes everything that Assassin's Creed 2 did and improves on it. You can recruit and train your own assassins, and it was one of the best systems Ubisoft ever created and then forgot about. Calling in a squad of assassins to instantly eliminate these targets, it never stopped being satisfying, and I really wish they explored this more in the future games. It's kind of a mechanic that should have become permanent in the franchise future. You don't need to be the lone assassin all the time, and there's a lot of potential for doing co-op assassins thing, which again, the franchise could have done, but I'm not here to fix the franchise. I'm here just to rank the games. So back on topic. Revelations, of course, served as both the conclusion to Ezio's journey and the final chapter of Altair's story. If you know, you know. And the emotional connection kind of between these two characters really is one of the most powerful moments in the series. The trilogy also pushed the Desmond storyline forward in a lot of meaningful ways. And at the time, it felt like the franchise was building up to something incredible. If you know the Desmond, he's a modern day quote unquote assassins from the first, second, and third game. So when people think of Assassin's Creed, obviously, if you ask people about Assassin's Creed, the first one they're going to talk about is Assassin's Creed 2. Or if you ask them what's their favorite assassins, more people are going to talk about Ezio. Even if there are better games in the franchise, or if this list flip-flops around all over the place, Ezio still remains one of the best characters in the entire franchise. And that there's a reason for that, is he was presented in such a way, and we've taken such a long journey with him. So that is my number 2. And now, coming in at number 1, I was recording and I hit pause for some reason. I was just like, I should send the thing here. You know what it is. There's only one left. It's Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. This game is the king. It is still the king. It is still the best game in the franchise, and I will fight you on that one. It is very, very unlikely that this one will be dethroned any time in the future. It's not just the best Assassin's Creed, but it's one of the best pirating games ever made. Ubisoft somehow managed to create a game where being both the assassin and the pirate fulfills your fantasies. It's just so good. And Edward Kenway he's this very charismatic, flawed, and very funny and relatable person. And this comes off after Connor's stoicism. Edward felt like a breath of fresh air. You get the ship, the Jackdaw, and sailing the Jackdaw across the Caribbean, like, remains one of the greatest experiences in gaming. And of course, it's the sea shanties. You cannot tell me you've played this game and like, I don't like Assassin's Creed 4, but you hear those sea shanties and you're just like, but the sea shanties were great because they were so entertaining that I very rarely fast traveled in this game. I would sail everywhere just for the sea shanties. Also, you get to upgrade the Jackdaw, and it creates this like consistent sense of progression as you're able to take on bigger and bigger ships. You know, eventually taking on, I think they're called the Man of Wars, the big ass ships. And then you have the legendary ships, of course, which are also fun to hunt at, you know, in the end game of everything. So everything that this game does sailing wise is damn near perfect. You get to board enemy ships after you take them down, and then you got to battle there and you got to take out the ship. There's just so much to do with the sailing. So much so that they actually spun it off into Skull and Bones, which would have been a great game if they didn't take so fucking long to produce it. Because I played that for a bit, and it really did feel like the sailing mechanic from Black Flag enhanced, but again, it was also a live service game, so it kind of ruined it for me as well. Those 4 legendary naval battles were like some of the toughest and most satisfying encounters in the entire franchise. Also, you meet Blackbeard, who is one of the best historical characters Ubisoft has ever portrayed. And I know I've said that about a couple of them, but this shows you Ubisoft at their peak. You also get underwater exploration, which really added another layer to the adventure, which was kind of fun because it's not one of those games where water hurts the main character. You're going to swim, and he's going to swim, and it's done very well. You also had the Kenway's Fleet app, which on your phone, which is well ahead of its time, in my opinion, because it kept players engaged even when you weren't playing. You basically could control your fleet and what it was shipping and what it was doing from your phone when you're away from it, and I did that a lot at work. The freedom is the central theme of this game, and no Assassin's Creed title has captured that feeling better. This world was really large without feeling bloated, and again, I believe it's the sailing mechanic that made it feel bigger than it actually was, while at the same time making it fun to, traverse from island to island. And these islands, of course, provided exploration while still preserving that Assassin's Creed parkour feeling. It does have a very emotional story. It's funny, it's tragic, it's surprisingly mature in the end, and yeah, some of the tailing missions in the game were pretty bad, but hopefully with Resynced, as they've promised, they've fixed that and they made it a lot better. So I'm really looking forward to that. Even those problems weren't enough to stop Black Flag from kind of sitting at the top of my list. Like, for every flaw of this game, everything else is done so much better. If somebody asked me why I love Assassin's Creed, Black Flag would be the game I'd probably hand them to answer that question. So I'm going to end here. That is my entire list. That is 11 mainline Assassin's Creed games ranked. My list, very subjective. If you disagree with my list, that's okay. I mean, that's what these lists are all about. It's like sometimes I listen to ranking lists and I just shake my head and like, this guy obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. But if you want to, head over to the Discord, you can discuss it with me. You can tell me why I'm wrong. I'm always open to listening. I'm always open to changing my opinion as well, if somebody presents better evidence. But I don't think you'll ever knock Black Flag off of the top of my list. That's going to do it for the episode. That is episode 138. Brian has ranked the Assassin's Creed mainline games. Thank you for listening. As always, check out our Patreon, join the Discord, and don't forget to give us a good 5-star rating if you enjoyed the show. We really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to the tombs of the PS1 and Tomb Raider, and Alan and Sam and myself will be back to the normal, regular scheduled broadcasting. Until next time, take care, and remember to bring a cart of hay with you if you ever go climbing.